lived through that myself. There was all kinds of things that you were exposed to that day that you missed. When we're shocked, when we're traumatized the way all of us were that day, it's really easy to forget details and then to start focusing on the revenge factor. We've talked about this before on the show, and it worked like a charm on September 11th. But again, this is where the value of going back and listening to eyewitness testimony, listening to actual media reports, again calls into question the official story. This is Rick Sanchez of CNN, who came on at some point that morning, and this is what he had to say regarding the possibility of a bomb in a van.
I spoke with some police officials moments ago, Chris, and they told me that they have reason to believe that one of the explosions at the World Trade Center may have been caused by a van that was parked in the building that may have had some type of explosive device in it.
And from there, we can go on to Jack Kelly of USA Today that has similar input on the possibility of a car or truck bomb being looked into by the FBI.
Apparently what appears to happen was that at the same time two planes hit the building, that the FBI most likely thinks that there was a car or truck packed with explosives underneath the buildings, which also exploded at the same time and brought both of them down. That is the working theory at this point. That is still unconfirmed, but that is what the FBI is going on at this point.
And then you have Pat Dawson of MSNBC discussing the possibility of explosives inside, I repeat, inside the building.
Just moments ago, I spoke to the chief of safety for the New York City Fire Department. We received word of the possibility of a secondary device, that is another bomb going off. There was another explosion which took place. According to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
So at what point do we ask ourselves if what we've been told is even true? And I think that's the reason why we do this show.
Well, and one of the things that I find exceptionally interesting is that the 9/11 Commission never asked these questions of the individuals who experienced these explosions. These witnesses were never called to testify. These people were never asked, well, did you really experience an explosion? They never even looked into it. It was simply written off as a fiction. And so for us to be going back and finding eyewitness accounts that state explosion, 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 to hear the audio of it, to see video of explosions, is a very profound thing if all you're relying on is the official story.
And again, at this point, you can't take something seriously that goes against either the laws of physics or established protocol, or any of these things that existed long before September 11th, 2001. And when you have the volume of contradictions that compared to the official story simply don't add up, you have to pay attention. And even the Commander-in-Chief that morning has done his part to suggest, if not prove, and again, proof is a hard thing to come up with in a situation like this, because given where these attacks truly came from, which I think at this point we can safely conclude that it wasn't exactly 19 hijackers with box cutters. There's a whole lot more than that. But this is an interesting clip that I heard years ago. I've never forgotten it. This is George Bush when questioned, I believe in 2004, in the run-up to the presidential election against John Kerry. He was asked about what he was doing and what his thoughts were on the morning of September 11th. And this is a quite interesting quote.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident.
Now, we're going to play this one more time, just in case you did not get that. This is George Bush discussing the first impact.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. and said it must have been a horrible accident.
Now, why Warren, upon looking at the first impact, which wasn't televised, there was no media coverage of that event. In fact, you've talked about the Nade brothers clip. It was that night or the next day that it was broadcast?
It was actually that night, and it first aired on Telemundo, on the Spanish channel. They were the first people to get a hold of it, and they aired it. And it wasn't really seen widely until the next day.
So there's no live coverage of the first plane hitting. He specifically says he used to fly himself, and he thought, one terrible pilot. Well, he wasn't talking about the first moment he saw both impacts, or the second impact, because at the time you see the second impact, you're no longer thinking to yourself, what a terrible pilot. You're thinking, what the hell is going on here? That's when everyone assumed that this was intentional, regardless of who was perpetrating this act. This was not an accident. Once, okay, maybe so. On a clear day, doubtful, but maybe so. But twice, Well, my question, I guess, is how did he even see this first impact?
Well, and you know my opinion on that as well as anything. I believe he was simply lying about it. I don't believe he actually saw it before going into the classroom at the school. I believe it was a campaign stunt and that he was simply lying and therefore politicizing 9/11 as we have witnessed, or had witnessed the Bush administration do, ever since September the 12th of 2001.
And even though you'll seldom hear Warren or myself disagree on many things, I do frankly believe that I think that people slip, and obviously George W. Bush wasn't exactly one of the brightest speakers that we've ever had holding office in Washington, D.C. But given the fact that there's so much more to this story, just the mere fact that you have explosives in the buildings, and this much is confirmed. Officially confirmed, no, but that doesn't change the reality of the situation. And for explosives to have made it into these buildings with such high volume and precision tells you not so much that George W. Bush did know about it or that he planned it. I've never felt that he planned it. I don't think this guy could tie his shoe very well. But know about it? Yes, I believe so. And I do think that there's some credence in what you suggested, that it was just a campaign stunt and just a bull-faced lie. But I kind of lean towards, he says there was a TV on, and I just don't put it out of the realm of possibility that here they were outside of the elementary school in Florida, and there's obviously TVs on board. We got TVs in minivans now, and live coverage or not, I do know that the technological ability, I think you'd have to agree that the ability was there to see this, if in fact they chose to. And given the grand scope of this conspiracy, that doesn't stretch the boundaries of reality for me. Last quote here from George Bush again. I don't remember exactly when this was recorded, but I do know that Commander-in-Chief is outside of the White House, perhaps the Rose Garden. In fact, I think it was the Rose Garden, but I could be wrong. But he's holding a press conference, numerous members of the media present, and he apparently has been addressing, if not justifying, the results of the interrogation of Zacarias Moussaoui, who was said to be the 20th hijacker, if you believe in that sort of thing. And this is what he has to say. And notice the little slip in here.
He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping.
Now, due to time constraints, because I know Warren's getting antsy to talk about the media, not going to replay that, but he does clearly use the term explosives in his assessment of the data he was able to, or that the Homeland Security, whoever is doing this interrogating, was able to come up with from Moussaoui. I don't know where explosives and an airplane crash actually mesh, but to him they did, and onward we go.
Well, I tell you what, Dallas, I'm not sure where anything meshes in Bush's mind after